or his son Owen Brown, and you notice their log cabin that most likely is in the hills or used to be in the hills of Altadena. It's a very wild, rough country. It's part of the blends into the Angeles National Forest. And I don't recall if I mentioned in prior discussions, my father was a World War II veteran who served in the Pacific, and they built runways in some very treacherous, dangerous circumstances. So when he moved us up here in the foothills, it's still taken all these years to try to understand some of these things. But when I see other cultures that move to the hills, move to the foothills, I understand more. It's a protective measure. But back to the story of John Brown, I do recall mentioning and listening. 400 Souls has an episode about Frederick Douglass. Then now I'm again connecting the dots, and I want to cover that again because Frederick Douglass and John Brown were acquaintances, friends, whatever. And I want to just pull this up quickly just to remind us of those connections, how sometimes we have some interesting connections that are very significant, can be very important, but also some things to pay attention to. So let me just pull that up quickly from my Audible collection. As I've mentioned before, doing so much research, doing my work on my PhD, you discover how very little I actually know. But I want to play this segment about John Brown because this was the part about his connection with Frederick Douglass. It took a while. It happened in 1859. Then we'll come back to 2021. I just want to remind some of us who didn't study this in school how these connections are so very relevant. And again, I want to thank Dr. Ibram X. Kendi as well as his team. This narration is by Adam Serwer. So I want to pull that up quickly and go through it if I can. Listen now and enjoy. As I pull it up, let's see. There's a segment on Sally Hemings that I shared earlier, but I want to go through and just remind ourselves that this is some living history that is right in our doorstep, basically.
1859 to 1864. Frederick Douglass. Adam Serwer. By 1859, Frederick Douglass was a fugitive again. The formerly enslaved Douglass had famously escaped bondage in 1838, fled north, and become one of the most eloquent abolitionist orators in the country. But in October 1859, his friend, John Brown, had led a failed raid on the federal arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, hoping to start a slave insurrection and end the peculiar institution for good. Douglass knew of Brown's scheme, but had declined to participate. Yet his association with Brown had made him a wanted man, and he fled to Britain rather than face trial in Virginia. Douglass would later write in his autobiography, Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, that he felt Brown was about to rivet the fetters more firmly than ever on the limbs of the enslaved. Despite Brown's entreaties, Douglass recalled, "My discretion or my cowardice made me proof against the dear old man's eloquence. Perhaps it was something of both which determined my course." As for his escape, I knew if my enemies could not prove me guilty of the offense of being with John Brown, they could prove that I was Frederick Douglass, the orator wrote, and I knew that all Virginia, were I once in her clutches, would say, "Let him be hanged." He took pleasure in the irony, however, that it was the men who wanted him clapped in chains who would themselves soon rise up in armed insurrection. Perhaps, Douglass wrote, the Democrats on the Senate committee investigating Brown's failed rebellion saw that by using their senatorial power in search of rebels, they might be whetting a knife for their own throats. If Brown was a lone radical in 1859, several events would enlist the North in a quest for the violent abolition of slavery by 1861. In the interim, Douglass had quietly returned to the United States to mourn the death of his 10-year-old daughter, Annie. As the Southern Confederacy rose,
We'll pause here. It's interesting, those connections. As I studied history, it always seemed to be so far off, but not necessarily in my backyard. That's why I want to highlight these things. As I said, I discovered that Owen Brown, John Brown's son, is buried right in our own backyard here in Altadena, Pasadena area. Now, Ethan Hawke just had a Showtime special called Good Lord Bird. And again, I'm connecting the dots because he played John Brown and showed a little bit more background of the story, as well as how he actually befriended a young person. So I want to play this again. Showtime.
All they know is he was hung for being a traitor.
And Ethan Hawke.
Who is John Brown? That's a very good question. He is an abolitionist often credited with starting the Civil War, but it's complicated.
What exactly is this new plan of
There's
yours?
Frederick Douglass.
Become clear. He's most famous for a raid on Harper's Ferry, where he took over the nation's largest armory in hopes to free the enslaved populace of the United States of America.
He attacked Harper's Ferry with 19 people. That would be the equivalent of me attacking the Pentagon with 300 people.
He was fighting against the world, essentially. He created this huge ripple.
John Brown didn't just care about black folks, he cared about white folks, he cared about women, like all of us. He wants human equality. Unlike all of us, he was going to do something about it.
Tell me, how many are in his army?
Damn near 10, I guess.
10! That's not even a dozen! 10!
That's
He
Frederick
became a
Douglass
figure
again.
of mythic proportion, whose story was eventually covered up by those who wrote American history, in part because the subject of race was and continues to be something that we find very difficult to talk about.
For a long time, people have been very scared to tell the story of John Brown.
That story is so hard to tell that the only way to tell it, really, is to tell it with humor. If we can use history to laugh at ourselves, then that gives us an opening to dialogue with one another.
Federal troops are coming! They believe you to be an insane criminal! I am the sanest man you have ever seen!
We'll cut here. So, again, I quickly consumed this information, but I'm going to revisit it because it's on Showtime. It's an important piece of history. And as I've mentioned before, I think it's another one that's remained hidden or somewhat under wraps. So I want to highly highlight this in, as well as bring us back to the present. Now, I think I've talked enough for now. I did come up with a list of peer-reviewed scholarly journal references that highlight what I'd mentioned as a possible hypothesis to study the idea of passing and the idea of race as being something that's not necessarily scientific, but it has had a significant impact on our lives. So some people might say, well, the idea of passing might not be relevant. So I did a search, started thinking again, and I found a whole list of references about passing in transgender communities, passing in terms of politics, pretending to be one thing instead of the other, your true self. There's another article. So I'll go through this list by Anderson. These are all 2020 current references in line with my doctoral studies. Peer-reviewed scholarly references regarding gender issues, regarding University of North Carolina, performance and the politics of passing. Another article by Favor about gendered, racial, and literary passing in terms of counterpolation of dreadlock hoax. Number 4 by Gomez, Cervantes is the first name, Looking Mexican, Indigenous and Non-Indigenous Latina in terms of passing. Passing and posing between black and white. So it's not just a black and white issue. It's something that's real today. These articles were all written in 2020. Next one, roast beef and reggae music, the passing of whiteness, undoing place, also 2020. So again, this is a list I can include or provide for reference. Another one, for colored and for white, segregating consumption in the South. Next, by Hamad, how white feminism betrays women of color. Next, Hatab, the uncanny in Nella Larson's Passing, a psychoanalytic study. So there's more to it besides just that change, supposed passing off as one thing or another. Another one, which is interesting, by Mokalim, and it's about Toronto, Canada, titled, I Guess I Shouldn't Come Back Here. It's about racism and discrimination as a barrier to accessing health and social services for the urban Métis women in Toronto. These are the, I believe, First Nations people in Canada, which is something to think about if one has to change their race or identification just to receive medical treatment. It's a serious indictment of some societal ills. It's published in the Journal of Racial and Ethnic Health Disparities. Next, the model minority passing in the BLM age under Asian stereotypes as subversive strategy for combating anti-Blackness in Yamamoto's A Fire in Fontana and TIPAC's Court Interpreter. So there's quite a few issues that we still have to deal with when the term passing is used. Here's 4 more, just to make sure my listeners understand that I'm just not making stuff up. It's based on my experience, observations, and there's quite a bit of scholarly peer-reviewed journals to back this up. The last 4, ambivalent white racial consciousness, examining intersectional reflection and complexity in practitioner graduate training in the Women and Therapy Journal. Next, by Saad, Me and White Supremacy, How to Recognize Your Privilege, Combat Racism and Change the World. And the last 2, Takashita, Mixed Children in Japan from Perspectives of Passing, titled, published in the Asian Ethnicity Journal, which is very interesting because the tennis player was recently honored with an ESPY award and has a documentary coming out on July 16th. And the last one, published by White 2020, I Investigate Lynchings, published in the Manoa Journal. So again, I just wanted to give those journal reference citations and bring us back to the present. As I said, there's 2 interesting things I want to highlight because in my book, I didn't include the cover, Engineering Management of Globally Distributed Goods and Services. On page 90, I talk about engineering solutions to meet the most complex challenges and refer to Fluor in particular, ranked number 1 in engineering and construction, number 1 in E&R, top 20 design. So I want to do a quick virtual tour of 2 major construction and architectural projects because I'm honoring the work that's continued on during COVID-19, as well as a remembrance and appreciation of the sacrifice of the soldiers, including my father who built those runways, did that work. I think that was a precursor to the Army Corps of Engineers. And we can look around, and I believe some of those places are still in play. So I will stop talking. I found a great musical interlude that I want to include while we take the virtual tour. So just bear with me as I pull that up, because in COVID, there seems to have been a ton of creativity, most likely quite a few new births, but I'll add this as a musical touch to the last part of this presentation. And it's Steve Reich and Matthew Howard of LA Phil. And it's, to me, a good representation of the action and activity going on here during COVID times.
enjoyed Coach McVay.
SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. And part 2, LAX Airport virtual tour of the current project, Linksys. And Fluor is a major part of this. And we'll repeat this a minute more. It's only about 5 minutes, but I want to thank these artists who've kept their craft and their excellent work going during COVID-19. $5 billion People Mover project, and I worked with the business development team as they were proposing, and now they're hard at work making steady progress. And these are the renderings of what it will look like. Okay, that's it for now. I'll close out. This is Phyllis. Thank you for listening to this episode of Second Wind, and I'll be back soon. Have a great day.